They look European, speak a language derived from Dutch, follow strict Calvinist traditions, but Europe doesn't claim them, and Africa never fully accepted them. They are the Afrikaners, formerly known as Boers, the farmers, a people born in Africa yet culturally tied to a continent thousands of miles away. For over 300 years, they've existed in a strange in-between space, neither fully European nor recognized as African. They call themselves Afrikaners. The word literally means Africans, yet their identity has been contested, denied, and debated since the day they emerged. And when geneticists finally analyzed their DNA in the 21st century, they discovered something that shattered the mythology both Afrikaners and their critics had believed for centuries. The Afrikaners are not a pure European population transplanted to Africa. They never were. From the very beginning, they were something else, something new, a people created by Africa itself through mixture, isolation, and trauma. The story begins in 1652, not with conquest or colonization in the traditional sense, but with commerce. The Dutch East India Company, the VOC, one of the most powerful corporations in history, needed a resupply station. Ships sailing from Europe to the lucrative spice markets of Indonesia faced a brutal journey around the southern tip of Africa, a voyage that took months and killed sailors through scurvy, starvation, and disease. The VOC decided to establish a small refreshment station at the Cape of Good Hope, a place where ships could stop, restock with fresh water and vegetables, and continue their journey. It was never meant to be a colony. It was a way station, a corporate outpost, nothing more. But within a generation, something unexpected happened. The station became permanent, and the people stationed there began to change. The VOC sent employees, most of them men, from the Netherlands, Germany, and France. Very few women came. This created an immediate problem. If the settlement was going to be permanent, the men needed families, but there were almost no European women available, so they looked elsewhere. The Cape was not empty. It was home to the Khoe and San peoples, collectively known as the Khoe-San, indigenous pastoralists and hunter-gatherers who had lived in southern Africa for tens of thousands of years. The VOC also brought enslaved people, not from Africa as most people assume, but from across the Indian Ocean, Bengal, Indonesia, Madagascar, Mozambique, and the Malay archipelago. These enslaved women worked in homes, on farms, and in Cape Town itself. And within the first generation, something that colonial authorities tried to hide, but could never prevent, began happening. European men married, cohabited with, or had children with Khoe-San women and enslaved women. The children of these unions were raised in Dutch-speaking households, baptized in the Dutch Reformed Church, and considered part of the settler community if their fathers acknowledged them. This wasn't a small-scale phenomenon. It was foundational. By the early 1700s, the Cape Colony was already a mixed society, and the people who would become Afrikaners were already, genetically, not purely European. In the 2000s and 2010s, multiple genetic studies analyzed Afrikaner DNA using genome-wide sequencing, Y chromosome analysis, and mitochondrial DNA. The results were unambiguous and shocking to many. Approximately 99% of Afrikaners carry some degree of non-European ancestry. That's not a typo, 99%. The average Afrikaner genome is roughly 95% European, but the remaining 4% to 7% is African and Asian. And here's what surprised researchers. The Asian component is often larger than the African component. This reflects the Indian Ocean slave trade. More enslaved people came to the Cape from Bengal, Java, and Indonesia than from sub-Saharan Africa in the early colonial period. These women left genetic signatures that persist in modern Afrikaner populations. When geneticists plot Afrikaner genomes on principal component analysis charts, which visualize genetic relationships between populations, Afrikaners don't cluster with Europeans. They sit between Europe and the global south, drifting toward Africa and Asia. They are genetically closer to mixed populations like Cape Coloureds and other Afro-Eurasian groups than they are to modern Dutch, German, or French populations. The mythology of purity was always a lie. The Afrikaners were never a European population living in Africa. They were, from the very beginning, a new population created by Africa. The maternal lineages, though a minority, are still present, and they trace back to specific women known in Afrikaner genealogy as the Stammoeders, the founding mothers. Two of the most famous are Krotoa, also known as Eva, a Khoe woman who served as an interpreter between the Dutch and the Khoe-San and who married a Danish surgeon, and Angela of Bengal, an enslaved woman from India who was freed, became a landowner, and whose descendants integrated into Afrikaner society. Modern Afrikaner families, even those who identify as entirely European, often carry direct maternal descent from these women. Genealogical research has traced thousands of Afrikaners back to non-European Stammoeders, and this means that the Afrikaner identity, built on a mythology of European purity, has always rested on a foundation of African and Asian maternal ancestry. The fathers were European, the mothers were not, and the children became Afrikaners. But this small founding population, a few hundred families expanding into millions, came with a genetic cost. When a population grows rapidly from a small number of founders, rare genetic mutations can become common. This is called the founder effect, and the Afrikaners are one of the most extreme examples in human genetics. Certain genetic diseases that are vanishingly rare in Europe occur in Afrikaners at frequencies 100 or even 1,000 times higher than anywhere else on Earth. Porphyria variegata, a metabolic disorder that causes severe abdominal pain and sensitivity to sunlight, affects about 1 in 300 Afrikaners. In most populations, it's 1 in 50,000 or rarer. Fanconi anemia, a blood disorder, has been traced to a single Huguenot ancestor who arrived in the late 1600s. That one person's mutation now affects hundreds of Afrikaner families. Familial hypercholesterolemia, a genetic condition causing dangerously high cholesterol and heart attacks in people as young as 30 or 40, affects about 1 in 70 Afrikaners. The global average is 1 in 500. And then there's Oudtshoorn skin, a genetic skin condition named after a town in South Africa, found almost exclusively in Afrikaners and virtually unknown outside this population. These aren't just medical curiosities, they're biological echoes of history. They're proof that the Afrikaners went through an extreme population bottleneck, expanding rapidly from a tiny founding group, and that bottleneck locked in mutations that would have disappeared in a larger, more genetically diverse population. The Afrikaners became a living laboratory for studying founder effects, and their unique disease burden is a permanent reminder of their origins as a small, isolated group in the 1600s and 1700s. But genetics only tells part of the story. What really forged Afrikaner identity wasn't biology, it was trauma. In 1806, the British took control of the Cape Colony. For the Dutch-speaking settlers, this was the beginning of a crisis. The British imposed English as the official language, restructured the legal system, and in 1834, abolished slavery across the British Empire. For Afrikaner farmers who depended on enslaved labor, this was economically catastrophic. But the final straw came in 1815 at a place called Stammoeders. A group of Afrikaner farmers rebelled against British authority after a dispute over the treatment of Khoe-San workers. The rebellion was crushed. 5 of the leaders were sentenced to death by hanging. On the day of the execution, the scaffolding collapsed. Instead of seeing this as a sign from God to show mercy, the British rebuilt the gallows and hanged the men a second time in front of their families. This event, Stammoeders, became seared into Afrikaner collective memory as a symbol of British cruelty and injustice. It radicalized an entire generation. In the 1830s, thousands of Afrikaner families decided they'd had enough. They packed their belongings into ox wagons and began what they called the Great Trek, a mass migration away from British control into the interior of southern Africa. These weren't wealthy elites, they were farmers, families with children, moving into unknown territory, facing hostile environments, wild animals, and conflicts with indigenous kingdoms like the Zulu. The trek was brutal, many died, but those who survived established independent republics, the Transvaal and the Orange Free State, Boer republics governed by Boer law, where Afrikaans was spoken and British authority didn't reach. For a brief period, it seemed like the Afrikaners had achieved what they wanted, independence, land, and the ability to govern themselves. But it didn't last. In 1886, gold was discovered in the Transvaal, and everything changed. The British wanted that gold, and they were willing to go to war to get it. The Second Anglo-Boer War, 1899 to 1902, was one of the most brutal conflicts of the early 20th century. The British Empire, the most powerful military force on Earth, deployed nearly 500,000 soldiers to crush 2 small republics with a combined population of maybe 200,000. The Boers, outnumbered and outgunned, fought using guerrilla tactics, hit-and-run raids, ambushes, mobility. They were good at it. They held out for nearly 3 years. But the British responded with a strategy designed to break the Boers psychologically and economically. They implemented a scorched earth policy. British forces burned Boer farms, slaughtered livestock, poisoned wells, and destroyed crops. Thousands of Boer families, mostly women and children, were left homeless. And then the British created something new in modern warfare: concentration camps. Over 100,000 Boer civilians, mostly women and children, were forcibly relocated to camps where they were held in horrific conditions. Disease, malnutrition, and neglect killed approximately 27,000 people, about 10% of the entire Boer population. Children died at even higher rates. Entire families were wiped out. The trauma of this war became the defining event in Afrikaner history. It created a collective memory of suffering, betrayal, and survival against overwhelming odds. And it transformed Afrikaner identity from a loose collection of farmers into a unified ethnic nationalism built on shared trauma. In the aftermath of the war, Afrikaner intellectuals and political leaders worked to rebuild a shattered people, and one of the tools they used was language. Afrikaans, the language spoken by Afrikaners, had always been looked down upon by Europeans as kitchen Dutch, a corrupted, simplified version of the language spoken by uneducated farmers and their servants. But in the early 20th century, Afrikaner leaders began promoting Afrikaans as a symbol of identity. They standardized its grammar, created a written form, published literature, newspapers, and Bibles in Afrikaans, and declared that the language is the people. If Afrikaans survived, Afrikaners survived. And here's what's important to understand. Afrikaans is not just simplified Dutch. It's a Creole-influenced language shaped by the multilingual environment of the Cape. It has grammatical simplifications typical of Creole languages. It has loanwords from Malay, Portuguese, and Khoe-San languages. And it was learned as a first language by children raised by enslaved women who spoke Dutch as a second language and taught it to Afrikaner children in a simplified form. Afrikaans was born between cultures, not above them. It's a language Africa created, and that makes it, ironically, one of the most African things about the Afrikaners. What the Afrikaner story teaches us is that people are not fixed categories. They're processes. They change, they mix, they adapt. The Afrikaners started as Dutch, German, and French settlers. Within a generation, they had absorbed African and Asian maternal lineages. Within a century, they had developed a new language. Within 2 centuries, they had a distinct identity forged by geography, isolation, and conflict. They are not Europeans living abroad. Europeans see them as foreign, as too African. But Africans see them as too European, as colonizers who never belonged. And genetically, there's something in between. A fusion population created by the specific conditions of the Cape. A corporate outpost, a gender imbalance, the Indian Ocean slave trade, isolation, expansion, trauma, and time. They are a people Africa created, not through conquest or intention, but through the collision of migration, exploitation, and survival. And that makes them, in a strange way, as African as anyone else born on that continent, even if their history and identity complicate what we think African means. The Afrikaners are not unique in being a mixed population. Almost every population on Earth is mixed if you go back far enough, but what makes them unusual is the speed and visibility of their formation. Most populations mixed over thousands of years, and the mixing is hidden by time. The Afrikaners mixed within living memory, within genealogies that families can still trace. And that makes their story uncomfortable. It forces us to confront the fact that race is not a biological reality that has always existed. It's a social construct that emerged recently, and it often contradicts what genetics actually shows. The Afrikaners believed they were pure Europeans for 300 years. They built an entire political system, apartheid, on the premise of racial purity and separation, and then DNA proved that the purity was a myth, that the separation was arbitrary, that the people they oppressed were, in many cases, their genetic relatives, descendants of the same founding families, just with different proportions of ancestry. If this exploration of one of the world's most genetically layered populations resonated with you, consider sharing it with others who care about the intersection of science, history, and human identity. Have you discovered unexpected ancestry in your own DNA? Do you think race is biological or social? And what do you think about populations that exist in the in-between spaces, neither fully one thing nor another? Leave your thoughts in the comments. The Afrikaners are a people Africa created, whether Africa claims them or not. And their story, uncomfortable as it is a reminder that identity is never as simple as we pretend. Thanks for watching.